Good morning. I am Pastor Phil. We are here in the beautiful sanctuary at St. Paul's. Today is... What day is today? Good morning. I'm Pastor Phil, and this is Family Fridays, and it's lovely to have you here with us today. We've gone through this past week, and we talked about two questions that I wanted you to contemplate. The first was, what is the focus and purpose of your devotional life? And the second was, when would you do this? These are two big questions that will inform how you go forward inside of the devotional life that you have alongside with your family. Now, traditionally speaking, we hear people talk about how devotions need to be at the beginning of the day or the end of the day, and those are the two major points, it's not one. We have never been able to pull that off for lots of reasons. The end of the day becomes a hard place for us to have devotions because of the fact that I'm not always around. I want to lead my family in these devotions. Now, this isn't to say that my wife can't, that she's unable to do so, but it's something that I want to do. I'm the head of my house. I'm the father of my children. I want to raise them in the fear and the knowledge of God. So evenings can become tough just because of the ministry that I have. Now, on the other side of this, we've got mornings. Now, my family is very interesting come mornings. My son and I are early risers. My daughter is not. She'll get up at the crack of noon and be very happy to have slept as long as she did. She is a preteen. And then my wife gets up in that 8 o'clock neighborhood generally. So we end up with this really spread out situation. And if we try to condense it, it doesn't work well, because either my son and I have been up for hours and we're in the middle of doing stuff already and it just doesn't work well, or we're forcing other members of the family to get up sooner, which makes them crabby and unpleasant and is completely counterproductive as well. So we deal with having to figure out how to make it work. And the way we've made it work is in two specific situations, one of which I'm going to share with you now. But I want to recap those questions I asked you to contemplate. The first one is, what's the point and purpose, the focus of what you're trying to do? The reason why this is important is because if you know what you're trying to do, you don't have to spend lots of time working around to where it is that you want to go. For my family, we tend to focus more into the idea of the catechetical or Christian living because of the fact that my daughter spent time inside of the Lutheran day school system while we were at the seminary. My son currently is inside of the Lutheran day school system. I would encourage you to take a look at Community Lutheran School. It's the school attached to St. Paul's and Emmanuel. It's an excellent school where we're trying to raise up academic excellence with Christianity at its foundational core. Take a look at the website, and then if you have any questions, feel free to contact the school and ask them. But because of that, the kids had this background and they were going to church regularly and doing all of these things. So the reality is the devotional side of the foundational information being in the Bible was there. What we needed to do was begin that focus into what does Christian living actually look like. And the way that we did this was driving between home and school. This doesn't work anymore because the school where my daughter goes is virtually across the street. The school where my son goes is in our backyard. So we don't have this time anymore. But when I lived in Arkansas, it worked out well. When my ministry started, I did a vicarage in Searcy, Arkansas, and then I received a call there as well, and I did ministry there for a short time. And while there, what we would do is from the time we got into our vehicle, we had a van at when we were in Arkansas. When we got into the van, from leaving the house to dropping the first student off at, or first child off at school, we would go through and we would have a bit of a devotional time. Now, mornings are difficult in my family for the reasons that I spoke about prior. My son and I would be up, we'd be ready to go, no problems. My daughter, on the other hand, was not nearly as excited about being up in the morning and had no interest in getting breakfast, getting dressed, getting ready for the day, and it created problems. So what we would generally do by the time we would get into the van, people everybody would have started to kind of get into that mindset for the day. Sometimes my kids might ask a question like, did they behave in the morning? If they're putting extra effort in, wanting to know that it had been noticed. And I would ask them, well, what do you think? And we would talk back and forth on that for a moment. And then I would ask what their day looked like. There's all those specials that they have during the course of a day that, PE and music and library and whatever else, that I would ask them to find out what they were having in school that day. And we would kind of discuss those things. And then we would close by my teaching them Luther's morning prayer. And the way we did this was I would go through the first week and just say the prayer. So it requires a little bit of intentional effort by the parent to be prepared to do what they need to. So don't think that, Pastor Phil just sat there like reading his phone driving down the road. That was not the case. That I know Luther's morning prayer, so I was teaching that to my kids, because there's points in life where it is really nice to have those formulated prayers that you just don't know what to say. That those formulated prayers that have been handed down through time become pivotal in the life of the believer, because they give you something to fall back on, testifying to the faith, allowing you to reach out to Jesus for whatever reason. So I started them with Luther's morning prayer at this point. Now, we had done something else prior, and we've actually kind of gone back to doing that because of the fact that we live so close to our schools. But generally speaking, what I did with my kids in the morning was about 5 to 7 minutes. It wasn't long. About as far as we are into the video right now is how long it lasted. That the first week, like I said, I would say their prayer for them, and they would pray along with me. They'd have their heads bowed, hands folded, and they would pray. The second week, I would say a line, they would say a line. I would say a line, they would say a line. And then the third week, we did the same thing. By the end of the third week, I noticed that they were starting to get really on the heels of what I was saying, suggesting that they were starting to learn the prayer themselves. So the fourth week, they led it. Now, the point of the devotion at that time was for them to learn this prayer. My kids both had been into Christian day schools. My daughter had gone through a Lutheran one during our time at the seminary. My son was attending a preschool at a Christian academy, but they were also coming home, and in the home they were hearing theological discussion, that it's just kind of in the air in my family. You'll sit down to Thanksgiving dinner and you might hear a philosophical notion, and then you hash it out theologically as well. And it gets interesting sometimes, but the thing is they're constantly hearing the Bible. They're constantly hearing these other things inside of our lives. And the result is that there's not a need necessarily to sit there and really hammer down on, hey, have you learned the story of Abraham? Now, this isn't to suggest that that's not necessary. There is a need for that. So don't discount that side of a devotional life, that it is important to have those things. But it's also important to have your focus and your understanding as to what you need them to do. Right now in my family, we have a focus towards the catechetical. My daughter is going to be going into confirmation class next year, most likely. My son is in a Lutheran day school, so these are topics that he hears. And we begin now with the application of the Bible into the life of the believer. Now, mom and dad should be providing an example of what the believer's life looks like, so that when you have this much more tightened devotional life, that it fits into everything that's going on around it. Now, if mom and dad aren't living the Christian life, it creates problems, because your kids are going to have questions and you're going to have to answer them. And I would pray that you answer them honestly, which can be pretty brutal. At least answer them as honestly as you appropriately can to the age of your children. So this is one of the ways that my family did this. Now, my intention is next week to actually show you what this looked like. I don't know how this is going to go. I'm at this point, my kids are not aware of the fact that we're going to be getting up and having kind of a school day morning for at least a little bit of it, in anticipation of showing you what all of that looked like. If they're a little bit rusty on their Luther's morning prayer, it might look like week 2, 3. If they're still solid on it, it might look more like that 4th week. But at any rate, my hope is for you to be able to follow along with us to kind of see what it looked like back when we were in Arkansas, and this was the pattern of devotional life that we had. I know that there's a push to have like 20, 30 or more minutes, depending on what it is for that devotion, but the reality is it doesn't have to be that long. Your life should be teaching your kids what the Christian life looks like. You should be doing some of these things anyways. So by having a focus on what it is that you're doing, you can be intentional and much more brief in how you teach that one thing. The week after I show you what this looked like, we're going to be going through and discussing how we kind of do devotions now. There's a bit of a public aspect to it, which is wonderful, and we'll talk about all that in a couple weeks. I try to keep my videos to that 8-minute at most mark, and we've gone well over that now, and I thank you for hanging in here with me to this time. I pray that as we're contemplating what the devotional life of the family looks like, that you're blessed and that you can take something away to see how you can help lead your family inside of that devotional life, that it doesn't have to be following that rigorous set approach that the church or individuals have traditionally had, but rather can be used organically inside of the life that you lead, following your needs and how you can proclaim Christ into the life of your children. If you have any questions, please feel free to either drop them here with the video or to contact me personally. I pray that God blesses each and every one of you, that you have a healthy, wonderful, happy weekend. I invite you to join us for worship at either here at St. Paul's at 8:30 in the morning on Sunday, or over at Emmanuel at 10:30. And I look forward to seeing you then. If not then, I pray that God blesses you as you worship at your own church. And I will see you on Monday as we continue contemplating the Gospel of John in morning meditations. God bless you.